What's up, guys? Neil Orfield here, and I'm going to show you how I will be setting up my fantasy cruncher for tonight's showdown slate between the Broncos and the Colts. This video is how I will be setting up for DraftKings, and I'll start as usual by adjusting my columns, what I see on the main page. Do that by going here. I've set up a quick view where I saved the columns how I want them to look. Looks like I already did this. So I've got my ownership projections, how much I'm using of players, their projections, etc., in the middle of the screen where I like them to be. And then most of the work I do will be in advanced options and within the groups tab and the general tab. I'll start in the general tab. Unique players per lineup. I'm playing 150 lineups, so I leave it at 1 unique player per lineup. If you're playing 20 or fewer, I might recommend changing this to 2 unique players per lineup. In the team salary field, I don't set a minimum. I do set a maximum just as a way to avoid my lineups being duplicated. If I am lucky enough to win, I want to win a lot of money, and that's not going to happen if I'm duplicated with 200 other people. And typically, the lineups that use full salary, not always, but a lot of the time, if you use your full salary, you will be duplicated with many other lineups in the contest. Usually, the less salary you use in general, and this is just a generality, not always true, but if you use less salary, you're going to run into fewer people using your same lineup, and sometimes you can still make some really good lineups, leaving significant money on the table. For the sake of this video, I'm just going to leave $1,000 on the table. So instead of using the entire $50,000 salary cap that DraftKings allows you to use, these lineups that I create are only going to be using a $49,000 salary cap. So none will be using within 1,000 of full salary. Offensive players versus defense is the default is set to 2 players, so you can have a defense facing 2 players from the opposite team. I'm going to set this to 5 players. I don't mind if I have 5 players from one team against the defense of the other team. Just imagine a scenario where the Colts tonight can't put up any points. They just don't score at all, and their defense has a pick 6. Most likely that defense is going to be the highest scoring player from the Colts, at least the highest scoring point per dollar player from the Colts. And if Denver puts up some points, they're going to have a lot of players in that optimal. So I don't mind having 5 players against defense, also just because it is a way to be a little bit more unique. Not a lot of people are going to play 5 players from one team against the defense from the other team. It's not something that I have in a lot of lineups anyway, so that's another reason it's not a major concern for me. I like it to be something that could come up, but it also doesn't come up in that many lineups anyway. So I like to just leave that option available if the defense projects well enough to potentially make it in as the only play from a team. Exposure cap, I leave at 100%. I will set a cap on my captains, but I do that on the main screen. So for this screen, I'm just going to leave this at 100%. Randomness, I set to 50% generally. You could do more, you could do less. It all depends on how much control you want to have over your lineups. If you want more control over your lineups, I would set that randomness a bit lower. And also, I am using the normal distribution randomness. So you can use a higher number here generally if you have normal distribution randomness, because most of those lineups are going to use projections closer to the player's average projections using normal distribution randomness, whereas classic randomness is just going to be completely random within that range, 50% above or below. So you might want to set that a little bit lower if you're using classic randomness, maybe 30 or 40%. Minimum projection included in calculation, currently set to 3. I think I'm going to set it, I'm going to keep it set to 3. You could change it lower, but I'm just going to alter projections. If I want a player to be in my lineup pool and he has a projection below 3, I will just give him a little bit of a boost. So I'm going to keep that at 3. You could alternatively change it lower if you want those players and you don't want to change their projections. All right, that looks like everything that I adjust on this screen. I don't touch players from each team max. I kind of like having 5-1 onslaught lineup, so I don't mind having 5 players from one team at all. That is the most you can have. All right, I'll move on to the groups tab. Hey guys, if you're a new Stokastic Plus Platinum or NFL user and want to give our NFL DFS tools a test run before purchasing, we have a great offer for you. Get access to all of our NFL DFS tools 100% free for 3 days. This includes full access to all the premium content and tools for NFL DFS that we have to offer on Stokastic.com, including new tools such as our lineup generator and player compare, as well as player projections, ownership projections, top stacks, our boom bust tool, and so much more. Click the the link in the description of this video below to join to activate your 3-day free trial now. Please note that Fantasy Cruncher is an add-on and is not included with this trial offer. And as always, I'm always making groups. Almost always my groups are going to be related to the quarterback because they are just the most correlated with other positions. It's especially with non-rushing quarterbacks, it's so difficult for them to be optimal on DraftKings without having pass catchers elsewhere in the lineup with them, just because on every passing play on DraftKings, the receiver scores a full point per reception and then also outscores the quarterback on each yard and each touchdown. So because the pass catchers outscore the quarterback by so much on DraftKings, I'm always going to want to have a pass catcher in there. Not always. With non-rushing quarterbacks, I'm almost always going to want to have a pass catcher elsewhere in the lineup. And sometimes I want to even set the rule to include at least 2 pass catchers in the lineup with my non-rushing quarterback. That's what I'm going to do here with Matt Ryan. Actually, the first group I'm going to make, I'll make a Wilson captain group. So I'm going to go down here. I'm finding Russell Wilson in the captain spot, and I'm going to choose the key player option. And he's going to be my only key player in this group. So this group is all centered around lineups that have Russell Wilson in the captain spot. And then I'm going to go and add all of his potential receivers into the secondary group. So I added Russell Wilson as the key player. You can see the key icon. For these other players, I'm going to be using the group option for the rest of the players in the secondary group. And so I'm going to add Cortland Sutton, Kendall Hinton. And one note with Kendall Hinton, pointed out by Justin Freeman of Run the Sims, Kendall Hinton has used the maximum. He's been called up 3 times from the practice squad. So to make it onto to be active today, he will actually be needed to sign to the Broncos full-time roster. So we'll have to check and see if Kendall Hinton is signed to the Broncos full-time roster. If he's not, he won't be eligible to play. We'll have to play some other Broncos pass catchers instead, but I'm going to add him to this group. I add pretty much everybody who might be in play at this point in the day, and then later on I can adjust as necessary. So I'm just adding anybody with a projection. Tomlinson, Saber. We have a lot of tight ends to deal with on this slate. A little bit of a headache there. Albert O. And then even Greg Dulcich doesn't currently have a projection. He hasn't played yet this year. He is eligible to be activated from the IR tonight. So I'm going to add him to the group just in case he does get added to the active roster. And you can add these running backs as well. That's up to you whether you want to include these running backs in the groups. I don't always. I will today. All right, and that does it for everybody I want in this group. With Russell Wilson, he does rush a little bit. His rushing has gone down in recent years, but he still rushes enough that I think he has some rushing upside for a spike week. So I think I'm going to keep this at, if any key players use at least 1. I'm not going to change it to 2 players with Russell Wilson, just because I think he has at least that potential to score a rushing touchdown and maybe be the optimal captain without including multiple pass catchers in the flex. But I'm still going to give boost to all of his pass catchers. So most likely, if I have Russell Wilson in the captain spot, he will have at least 2 pass catchers anyway. I'm just not going to require it because of that potential rushing upside. Cortland Sutton projects so well and is also expensive enough that I'm not going to give him a full boost. My concern being that for Cortland Sutton to be in the optimal lineup, he's going to have to put up a lot of fantasy points for this 9,400 price tag. But I also don't want him to be outscoring Russell Wilson because he's cheaper than Russell Wilson. So I'm not going to give him quite as big of a boost as other players. I'll give a bigger boost to some of these secondary options who can put up more fantasy points and still not be optimal. More fantasy points per dollar, I should say. Giving boost to all these guys to make it more likely that if I have Russell Wilson at captain, I'm going to have multiple Broncos pass catchers in there, rather than throwing in similarly projected pass catchers from the Colts, for example. And I'm not even going to bother boosting the running backs. I'd rather boost these pass catchers to make it more likely for them to be in lineups. But still, theoretically, requiring I could have a lineup here with Russell Wilson in the captain spot with just one of these running backs in the flex. Don't know if I'd love that if that happens. Maybe I should set a rule to change that. But for now, I'm just going to stick with this. And if that happens frequently, I'll come back and change it. All right, now I'll make a Ryan captain group. I should say, even with Russ, he doesn't have so much rushing upside that I think it would be incorrect to just say use at least 2 players from this group. That's something that I would consider doing. I think I'm leaving it at 1, but honestly, if I were doing fewer than 150, if I were doing 20 lineups or so, I would probably actually set this to 2 because it is more likely that if Russell Wilson is the optimal captain, he's going to bring multiple pass catchers along with him because he's going to need to be spreading the ball around generally because he doesn't rush a whole ton. And in Matt Ryan captain lineups, I am going to require 2 pass catchers. So Matt Ryan captain as my key player. And then adding all of these Colts receivers, Paris Hilton, Ashton Doolin, Michael Pittman. It is kind of a messy game tonight with a lot of players being out. We don't really know what to make of a lot of these situations. So it's going to be an interesting slate. Okay, so we've got Matt Ryan at captain. I'm going to say if any key players use, so if Matt Ryan is in the captain spot, I'm going to use at least 2 players from this group just because Matt Ryan is a statue. He has virtually no rushing upside. Of course, any quarterback can fall into the end zone from the 1-yard line, but Matt Ryan is a lot less likely to do it than a lot of other quarterbacks. He just doesn't really have that rushing upside in his likely range of outcomes. So I'm going to require that Matt Ryan be paired with at least 2 pass catchers if he's in the captain spot. Most likely, if he's in the captain spot, it's because he's put up a lot of points and it hasn't been to just one receiver. He's been spreading the ball around. So I'm going to give boost in addition to all of these receivers. Now, Michael Pittman does project significantly worse than Cortland Sutton. I keep making that mistake. So I am actually going to give him a little bit of a bigger boost to make it more likely that if Matt Ryan's in the captain spot, that I get Michael Pittman rather than Cortland Sutton. If you've watched enough of these videos, you may have noticed I'm a little bit OCD. I'm not extremely OCD, but I do always set all of these to even numbers for some reason. Maybe I'll give a little bit of a boost to Nyheim Hines just because he has more of a pass catching role. I think that's good enough. Okay, so now any lineup that has Matt Ryan in a captain, we're going to have at least 2 of these pass catching options somewhere in the lineup, and it's more likely to be receivers because I've given them the boost, or Nyheim Hines because I've given him a little bit of a boost as well. I think I'm happy with that group. I'll create another group that is Ryan in the flex spot because, again, he just doesn't have any kind of rushing upside. So if Matt Ryan is in the optimal lineup at all, especially on DraftKings where it is not where it is full point per reception, you're more likely than not going to want some other Colts pass catcher in the lineup with Matt Ryan. So Matt Ryan in the flex spot as my key player. And he's listed as a quarterback here, but just know that on Showdown, it's only captains and flex players. So if they're in their normal positions, I call that the flex spot. All right, so now I'm going to add all of the Colts receivers again to the secondary group. And you could make this group for Russell Wilson. I don't think it's quite as necessary just because he does have that a little bit of rushing upside, but it's still maybe a good idea to make a similar group for Russell Wilson. And in this group, because I have Ryan in the flex spot, I can also include these Colts in the captain spot to be in the secondary group. So I'm adding Michael Pittman to that group. Hines, Pierce, looks good. So now if I have Matt Ryan in the lineup, even in the flex spot, I am going to get at least one Colts pass catcher somewhere else in the lineup. You could also give boosts here if you want to, make it more likely that you get Pittman in the captain spot. I don't always give these kind of boosts, not totally necessary, but it makes it more likely that if Matt Ryan is in the flex spot, some of his better receiving options, maybe you give little boosts. That's kind of up to you whether you want to do that, not totally necessary. One other group that I have not talked about that I know some pros do, I've talked to several that do this group. I don't usually make this group, so this is just to give you an idea of what you can do with these groups functions. So what you can do is create group, low owned players. You can make a group and say, so let's see, can we sort by ownership here? So now we're sorted by ownership. You can make a group that says, I want every lineup to have at least one player who is under 10% owned, and add a group of, and we're not going to include captains here. Where are we at? Okay. Pittman in the captain spot, Judy in the captain spot. So Kylan Granson under 10% owned, Deion Jackson, Ashton Julin, Alberto, KJ Hamler, Montreal Washington. I also skipped right over the it's in the captain spot. Okay, good. All right, so I'm skipping over the captains. I'm guessing this is McManus in the captain spot. Tomlinson, Beck. You get the idea. I'm just kind of going through and adding every player who is going to, have a projection, be sort of interesting, maybe a long shot play, but is not getting a ton of ownership. This is probably not the whole group. I didn't go through that closely looking at these players, but you can see these are all players who are not getting much ownership at all. And you could say use at least one player from this group. And that just would say in every lineup that you make, you're going to have at least one player who is not getting a ton of ownership, just as a way to get unique. Again, this is not a group that I set. I just know that there are good players out there who do set this group. So it's something you could think about doing in your lineups. I'm going to delete it because I have other ways of getting different, but it's something to consider if you want to just include one of those players in every one of your lineups. Hey guys, if you're a new Stokastic Plus Platinum or NFL user and want to give our NFL DFS tools a test run before purchasing, we have a great offer for you. Get access to all of our NFL DFS tools 100% free for 3 days. This includes full access to all the premium content and tools for NFL DFS that we have to offer on Stokastic.com, including new tools such as our lineup generator and player compare, as well as player projections, ownership projections, top stacks, our boom bust tool, and so much more. Click the link in the description of this video below to join to activate your 3-day free trial now. Please note that Fantasy Cruncher is an add-on and is not included with this trial offer. And then, as I said, I'm going to come in here. I'm going to go click on the Captain tab. And just in the Captain tab, I'm going to set a cap on how much exposure I get to players. I'll set it at 20%. So now the most I can have of any player in the captain spot is 20%. I use my projections, crunch 150. All right, so the first lineups produced, Matt Ryan in the captain spot, Phillip Lindsay, Michael Pittman in the flex. So we've got 2 pass catching options in the flex. Looks good to me. Nyheim Hines in the captain spot. We've got Matt Ryan in the flex. So far, okay, we've got Wilson with Courtland Sutton, and Melvin Gordon. Wilson in the captain spot with at least 3 pass catching options here. I'm wondering if we get any that have Wilson in the flex without any pass catching options, because I did not make a group to disallow that because he has some passing rushing upside. it is a group that I would at least consider making. Is saying if I have Russell Wilson in the flex, include at least one pass catching option elsewhere. Looks like I'm not really running into it though. I guess just because the Broncos project so well that I'm always getting one of these other pass catchers in there with him. If I end up with a couple, I'm okay with that because it's going to be unique. And because, as I've said, Russell Wilson has a little bit of rushing upside. And if he scores a rushing touchdown and spreads the ball around, doesn't put up a ton of points through the air, but, enough to be put up 12 fantasy points with the rushing touchdown on top. He could be optimal, this particularly in a lineup that has a lot of Colts and just Russell Wilson from the Broncos side. If he is the highest scoring Bronco, it's at least a possibility, and it's not going to be very high owned. So it's something that I allow. It might be a mistake to allow that. Sometimes I think about just grouping that out and saying, if you have Russell Wilson, include one pass catcher, but I'm not going to force it just yet. And then the last thing that I do, so those lineups look okay, and I guess I can sort by my projected, who projects the best. So this is my top projected lineup so far. Wilson with 3 pass catching options, a couple of cheaper Colts coming back. You can see I've got Nyheim Hines and Phillip Lindsay. I've talked about this in my articles. I've got it in the second one too. I kind of like having 2 running backs from the same team because I know some people like to avoid doing that, just as a way to get a little bit unique. It may be getting less unique over time. Maybe more people are doing it. Now, these lineups, I've got Matt Ryan with just Nyheim Hines in the captain spot and Phillip Lindsay. So Matt Ryan with 2 running backs, no other pass catchers. Is it feasible? I think it's feasible. Nyheim Hines catches the ball enough. He could score a couple receiving touchdowns, be the optimal captain with Matt Ryan, obviously getting points for that as well. Phillip Lindsay does some work on the ground. I think these are fine lineups. Maybe not the likeliest, but they're going to be unique. And I think that they're okay. So I think these lineups look okay, but now I'm just going to look at my player exposures, and I do that just going through tab by tab, looking at each position. 64% Russ, 44% Ryan. I'm fine with that. Running back, getting a whole lot of Melvin Gordon, getting a whole lot of Nyheim Hines. These guys are now the bell cow backs on their teams, at least is our expectation. Javonte Williams is out, I think, for the entire year. We've got Jonathan Taylor out this week. So these guys step into much bigger roles, and the salaries maybe don't fully account for that. Mike Boone not getting any. He's priced up to $6,200. That's his price tag is just so close to Nyheim Hines, and he obviously projects much worse. Maybe I'd want to give a little boost to Mike Boone to see if I can get some. For newer players, I typically recommend just using the projections that Stokastic gives you, and you can just hit this thumbs up if you want more. It's each thumbs up you give is going to be an 8% change to that player's projection. Getting a whole lot of Phillip Lindsay. He's just 400, and the expectation is that he's going to be the RB2 for the Colts. So at 400, he just projects really nicely. I'm getting a ton there. Latavius Murray, and I should sort by salary here so I can see players' relative salaries. I probably want some Latavius Murray. We've got him projected for 0% ownership right now. If he's active, I think he's obviously going to get more than 0% ownership. 5,200. The price is not great for Latavius Murray, given that we don't really know what his role is. He may be the RB3 here. It's likely that he's the RB3 here behind Melvin Gordon and Mike Boone, but if he's getting no ownership, maybe I'll try to get to some Latavius Murray because he could step into a bigger role. We don't really know for sure what his role is going to be. Deion Jackson, 1,600. The price tag is right. It would take just one splash play for him to pay off that $1,600 price tag. Currently, I'm getting 6%. The field is at 8.8% projected ownership. Maybe I want a little bit more just because he could have a significant role in this offense. For all we know, they want to keep Nyheim Hines in the third down and receiving back kind of role, and maybe Deion Jackson could step into that Jonathan Taylor role. Certainly not what I'm expecting. I'm not suggesting that that should be your expectation. It's probably likelier that Phillip Lindsay steps into that role if anybody does, and even more likely that they probably just split it up a little bit differently altogether. But you never know what's going to happen. So I'm probably going to be overweight to these guys who maybe have that opportunity and aren't getting a ton of ownership. I think that's everybody that I would want in my player pool among running backs. And these guys all already project for more than 3 fantasy points, so I don't need to give them any fantasy point boost. Now, at wide receiver, I mentioned Kendall Hinton. There's a possibility that he does not get signed to the active roster, in which case you're probably going to want some KJ Hamler. I'm probably going to want some KJ Hamler anyway. He didn't play a significant amount last week. I think he played like maybe 8% of snaps last week. It was not a significant role at all, but at 2.9% projected ownership, I'm probably going to want KJ Hamler somewhere in my pool. He's 4,400. He's below a 3 fantasy point projection, so I'm going to give him a little bit of a boost, try and get him into some lineups. Ashton Doolin, maybe I'll give him some thumbs up, try and get more there. Alec Pierce, thumbs up, try and get a little bit of Alec Pierce. Already getting a significant amount of Pittman, Sutton, and Judy. Happy with that. Not getting much Paris Campbell. I kind of like Paris Campbell this week. I think he's got that splash play potential, so I'll give him a little bit of a boost. Kendall Hinton, I'll keep him where he is. You consider, do you want to put Montrell Washington into your player pool or Mike Strahan? I don't know. I'll think about it. If you do want them in, you're going to have to give them a projection minimum of 3. And then at tight end is a mess in this game. We just have so many tight end options who are viable, none that are great. So it's a mess. But I probably want more than just one tight end in my player pool. Mo Alley Cox is a guy at 4,800. He's always a red zone threat. He's 6'8". He's a giant and pretty solid receiver. So the ownership is high. I think I'm okay with that ownership, though. I'll probably try and get to some, and I don't think thumbs up will be enough, but I'll start there. I'll try to give some thumbs up. Mo Alley Cox is pretty interesting. Kylan Granson also gets a fair amount of opportunities at 3,200, 8.8% ownership. That interests me. Akwe played exactly 1 snap last week, so not feeling great about Alberto right now, but he's shown in the past he's a fairly talented receiver. He at least has that upside. He could play 0 snaps this week. I think that there is also in his range of outcomes that was an outlier and that he plays a more significant role. I'm willing to take a gamble there when he's getting 6% ownership. So I'm going to try to get some Albert O into some of my lineups. Jelani Woods is active enough that you could consider playing him at 1% ownership, 2,200. Sauber is naturally getting into some lineups. Tomlinson, Beck, these guys are not great receiving options. They play a significant role in the offense in terms of being on the field, but they just don't get targeted a ton. Up to you whether you want to include them in your player pool. I'll give them slight projections. And then, as I said, Greg Dulcich could be activated from the IR today. I think that he is more likely to be involved in the passing game than Beck and Tomlinson are. But it's kind of anyone's guess at this point how these tight ends are going to break down, who's going to get the opportunities in this game, who's going to get targets in this game. It's kind of rough out there, but I'll probably take some shots on some of these guys. Kicker, I'm getting a fair amount of both. If I don't make any adjustments to their projections or give them thumbs up, I'm going to get less than these numbers most likely in my next run, just because I've given boost to other players. So now their projections are lower relative to other players in their price range. I'm fine with that for now. I'm just going to leave it how it is. Currently getting 21% Broncos, only 3% Colts. 3,400 Colts against Russell Wilson. I think I want more than 3%. I'll give them a little boost. I guess I could just give them the old thumbs ups. All right, and then I'll crunch again. And see how they look. Yeah, these lineups look fine. Nyheim Hines in the captain spot, Matt Ryan in the flex. Could work out if Hines catches receiving touchdown or 2. Still not seeing Russell Wilson alone in the flex spots. Here I've got Wilson with just Melvin Gordon among pass catching options. It's not my favorite thing, but I like this better with Courtland Sutton. It's a group you consider making. I don't think I'm going to require Wilson to be with a pass catcher if he's in the flex spot, but I certainly would not fault you if you did that. It's definitely something that I will at least think about making a group for that. But this is my general process. I just look through the lineups. Do they look how I want my lineups to look in general? I think these all look okay, good enough, and probably unique enough. And then I'll sort by my projected fantasy points. And again, we've got Wilson in the captain spot with 3 receiving options, 2 of them being receivers. Sutton in the captain spot. We've got Wilson in the flex. I've said before, sometimes I like to have lineups that have a receiver in the captain spot without his quarterback in the flex because that can go a little bit over-owned. We just saw on Monday night that Cooper Kupp was the optimal captain and Matthew Stafford was not in that lineup. It happens a fair amount, and not enough people make lineups without the quarterback correlated with the receiver in the captain spot. So I don't require it, but I also don't hate to see it. There is obviously some positive correlation there. We've got to hear again Wilson with Judy in the captain spot, just one other receiver from the Broncos in the flex. I've said before, you can make a group that has, if you have one of the Broncos pass catchers in the captain spot, you could say at most one other receiver elsewhere in the lineup. I don't make those groups typically, or you could give negative boosts, but there is some negative correlation there. Like this lineup, we've got Cortland Sutton in the captain spot, both Hinton and Judy in the flex spots. So now we're looking at, Cortland Sutton has to get significant volume, and Kendall Hinton and Jerry Jeudy also need to get good enough volume to make it into the optimal. But with Kendall Hinton being only $1,000, I think it's viable. So I'm okay with that. Anyway, this is my general process, and then I'll go up here and I'll look at these tabs all over again. Getting 13% of each defense works for me. Kickers works for me, both double digits. Maybe I'll make adjustments here. I'm not getting any of these high-end tight ends. I'm probably going to go back and change these projections somewhat. The thumbs didn't do enough for me here, so I'll have to go in and actually manually adjust those projections if I want to get to those players, and I'll probably do that later on. Wide receivers, not getting any KJ Hamler. I think he's at least interesting. Paris Campbell, the thumbs didn't do a whole lot for me, just getting 3.3%. I'm going to want more than that, I think, of Paris Campbell. But this is my general thought process, just looking at individual players, looking at the lineups. Are they coming out the way I want them to? And I end up often crunching 20 to 30 times before I get to lineups that I like. That's not necessary. I think a lot of people crunch a lot less than I do. I'm a little bit finicky, I guess, in making sure I get to approximately the exposures that I like of some of these lower end options and still getting, close to as much as I want for the higher end options. But it's a lot more art than science, and everybody's process is going to be a little bit different. Anyway, hope you have some good luck tonight using this or a similar process.